the biggest gift you can have, which I really is boredom. Lack of hunger kills all your innovation, as you know. It kills your ideas, and struggles are so important. I've never really labeled for within myself being an artist. As an artist, it's your personal choice that what strikes you. Just the deeper connect you have with this is something which you need to protect. Don't get into trying to commercialize or make a living out of it, because most likely it won't work and you will hate it. Art is really, or any creative practice, is something which is your own answer for yourself. The whole idea about creativity is to go into a space which you can't figure out. You're basically struggling with that I'm being judged. So that fear is always a big problem with creative people, I think. I also don't have a problem in feeling less. So that has really helped me. How many antennas you keep activated? And that's really the most amazing thing. Bottom line is that how many lives can you have in one life?
Samar Singh Jodha is a photographer, world-renowned installation artist, mentor, speaker, and publisher who over the last 25 years has been using photography, film, and public art projects across the world to address various issues such as community development and conservation. In this episode, we deep dive into the world of art, creativity, and discover the secret to fueling your passion. Did you know that 44% of podcasts stop after episode 3? So that means all that time, energy, and money is just wasted, and you never get to truly see the benefits of podcasting. So if you want your show to stay alive and healthy, you can book a call in the link below, and let's get started today.
Thank you.
So Samar, just to give the audience some context of how we met. So Samar and I connected, maybe it was a year and a half ago, maybe almost, I can't remember how long it was. And we got connected through my friend Alexander, mutual friend Alexander. Shout out Alexander, love you, man. And just from that quick conversation we had, Samar, it was really interesting, your take on art, creativity, and you were quite passionate about how, you know, creativity gets killed as we get older. We're born creatives, and then that gets lost, and people get stuck in these silos of, I have to do this for my life. There's only one path. That was kind of what I really took away from our conversation.
Right.
But what I wanted to talk about today, Samar, so guys, for people who don't know, Samar is an artist, and he's done everything and anything in between, from sculptures to installations, photography, print, films, books, and even more that probably we're going to find out during this conversation. So what I wanted to talk to you today about, Samar, is your journey, your work, talk about art, creativity, some of the work that you've done. I know you do a lot of humanitarian work as well. It's something very important to you, and you're passionate about it. But I'm going to pause there, and before we get into everything, why don't you give all of us a little bit of background about yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for waiting for such a long time. I think it's 24 we will be talking
something
about,
like that,
right?
yeah.
Wow. Well, I would say, where does one start? I really like to talk to young people, and a lot of mentorship work I do with students and various professions. I really like to talk to young people because the struggle is there. It's very easy for me to be in a profession for 35 years, whatever practices those are, and I can tell you millions of war stories. But when you're a kid, you look at it like, yes, but I'm starting, tell me where do I begin from, right?
Yeah.
So what I usually like to do is run parallels, because parallels are much easier to connect, when I was whatever and you are the same age and all that. So anyway, I think the biggest struggle I had was academics. I was terrible at studies. My father, economist, he worked in many countries, so I went to school on 3 continents, lived in many places and all that stuff, which gave me huge exposure, but also gave me that sense of being different, not able to speak the language many times. English, was my first language. Or for that matter, the whole issue of identity, look different, color is different, accent is different. And there are issues which are young people suffer from, which is, I wouldn't say young people, everybody suffers, but at young age, you don't know how to deal with it many times. You're basically struggling with that I'm being judged. And that being judged is something which makes it very, very difficult, because it knocks off your confidence, your capacity, your capability, all your ability, whatever it is. Those are very issues which can really have a huge impact. And education, going back to education, is really, there isn't really an education. It's really a performance meter. If you got good grades, that's what education is. But what about rest of them? Because the problem with education is a fish has to climb a tree, as they say. And that's something which we all know about. But you're still pushed, you're still judged. So I had struggles. I have a brother who's younger than me by 2 years, smart kid. My father was really smart, PhD in economics, blah, blah, all that. I was just not in any of that stuff. But you had to go through that schooling. And, there came a time we went to one city, some country, and, I'd failed, and then we landed in the same classroom. And following year, he went 1 year ahead, and I was left behind. Today I can talk to you. You are decades, maybe I'm 100 years older than you are, but we can relate to it. But
Sure.
when you're in school, that senior is 1 year, man, nobody's going to talk to you, but you're a kid, man, kind of a thing. And so, those things really, I think at subconscious level, they really played very, very much in my head, which led to a lot of work, what I do. I also believe is that, we all say that failures are great because you learn from them and all that stuff. I'm just so glad that I had all my failures very early. So it can't be. So here in Dubai, I'll give you the best example. In 2000, I had just come to this place. I was trying to get, I had a very expensive divorce, so I had to come to Dubai to make some money. And I was consulting some photography. I was teaching someone. But I landed up at AUD, and there was nothing around other than Hard Rock Cafe, and there was just nothing. So it was just flat that time. Marina was just dug up. They didn't even build anything there. And I started on a temp basis. I started teaching at AUD, I can't remember, visual communication, photography, I think. And I think about 3 or 4 weeks later, the dean, I think it was the dean's office I was called into, and they had some feedback from the students. And they said, why don't you teach, full time? So I said, can't do it. So how about, part time? But I travel a lot. So I said, I can't really do that. So there were 2-3 other people sitting there and, professors and all that. And they said, no, it'd be really good for us also. And you'll also enjoy it. It's a new school and all that stuff. But do you have an MFA, because you need an MFA to teach, right? So I said, I don't have anything beyond grade 7. So I've never studied beyond grade 7. So for them, they thought I was kidding, I said, yeah, that's it. I kept failing. Of course, I went to film school, I went to design school, I went to art school, I went to photography school. I did lots of these programs, whether summer or full time. I would go in there, first semester, paid the fee, everything. And then you start studying, going through that half a semester, and then you get a notice from the admin office that could we have your school leaving certificate. So I would just leave, like I'm done with this place. So I did a couple of that stuff around. But that really helped me in terms of looking at various practices. I also don't have a problem in feeling less. So that has really helped me, because you sit there and you see these sculptors or this filmmaker and they're talking all this stuff. And I'm like, man, yeah. But, that's where the learning is. The trouble with, I think, most of us is, including I've suffered that, is that, your whole ego and your whole philosophy is just surrounded by that, I'm experienced. Why you experienced? you're not Jimi Hendrix, So I think you need to really be open about it. So yeah, so that was really the childhood part of it, I would say. And I came back to India. I went to design school. I don't know how it happened. I applied. I put a portfolio in there. Typical. It was only design school 40 years back.
And you got it through, you saw it through an ad in the paper, right?
Yeah. I saw an ad in the paper. And thousands apply, and then I think 800 shortlisted, 40 called for the interview, and 4 got in there. So I was one of them. And it was on a unit of fellowship and all that. So I did that for a year, finished that, and then I went off to the US, went to a bunch of schools there. what really, so talking about the practice itself,
Sure.
what I find is that creativity, as what you spoke right in the beginning, we're all born with it, right? We know that. But then you go to school and they inject you chemistry and math, and they try to activate your left brain. But it's not that the right brain is dead; it just goes to sleep. We all have it. It's not about that you have to be a great painter and do a canvas, but it is as simple as how you dress up or how you arrange your dinner table, or So but we all have it, of course. What I find difficult is that when you go through this very hardcore activation of your right brain, where you are working on whatever that creative practice is. You go to, let's say, an art school or a design school, and you learn how to do that perfect circle. And you work on it, and it's frustrating, and you're not getting it right, and the colors are not coming right. But gradually you figure that out, and then you go to the next stage, and onwards. You don't go on your left brain space where it is about logic and, let me do a business degree or whatever it is. And, I get a job, and then, I work in a cement factory, and my whole mission is from 20,000 bags, how to make it 40,000 bags so I can, get bonus of this. So you are in a very much more free-spirited or free-flowing space on this creative thinking. The trouble what I have is that you struggle with that, but that struggle was where your juices were flowing, your struggles and all that stuff was going on. And then you get out of there and you start practicing doing that circle. And you're, as a metaphor, you're doing your galleries and your shows and your curators, your buyers, your critiques. Everybody's all around you, and you're doing wonderful. And you're selling. As you get older, you get more clients and all that stuff, and you start establishing your name and fame and money and all that stuff. And then other thing kicks in, because you need another second home somewhere in the mountains or the beach, or you're looking at those holidays with your partner and the kids' education, all that other stuff which is part of, which becomes part of your life. So I understand that security part and all that. But the trouble I have is that, you went through this whole thing. You should have just gone and become that cement maker, because you're just scaling yourself up. The whole idea about creativity is to go into a space which you can't figure out because it's not logic. And are you ready to risk that, that I'm going to be doing this great publishing publishing company I have, but I'm going to quit this and I'm going to go and decide to go teach, and I don't know how to teach, but I got to figure it out. I didn't know how to make a film, but, I'm making a documentary. So the struggles and those falling and whatever it is, that really, to me, that's really exciting. It's not that I've had a great flow. There are lots of failures. I've had a few bankruptcies. So I've had a lot of struggles. But end of the day, it is that excitement of learning which stops. We're only learning how to save more money to, about investment. That's not learning, if you know what I mean.
On that, so a couple of points to touch on first. First of all, I never knew that you taught at AUD, so that's where I graduated from as well, and I host their podcast too. They're one of my clients, so AUD has a very special place in my heart. So I'm like, an alum in teaching, I guess.
Yeah.
And what you talked about there, Samar, which I thought was very interesting, is the how that creativity is that delve into uncertainty. It is there is improvements along the way, but you don't know where that improvement is going to take you, unlike, let's say, say traditional systems that are very structured, logical. Okay, I need to finish point A, I get to point B, but like the path is clear, is there, I know where I'm going to end up, right? But I wanted to take a step back. So you mentioned your father, I know, was a economist as well, but your mother was the artist. And I know when you were young, you guys were traveling all over, you studied all over the world, like you said earlier, 3 different continents and stuff. I wanted to set the stage for our conversation today first by getting a definition clear, because you touched on, even before we started recording, that you're saying like, yeah, I'm a creative, you're a creative. And honestly, I never have considered myself to be a creative person, but that's because my definition of what creativity didn't allow me to accept that or feel that way. But I had a guest on the podcast, and the whole thing was about creativity, and she showed me like, okay, no, maybe she gave me a different perspective. Oh, maybe I am creative. Maybe what I am doing is, in quotations, art. But in Khalid's view, what I don't consider what I'm doing. There's no art here in my personal opinion. So I'd like to set the stage first from your perspective, Samar. How would you define art?
How would I define art? I think the minute you start defining it, then you're giving it a structure. And like what I said in the beginning, that we are still, everybody's an artist. It's just that I'm sitting with, a qualified painter. You may not have done that, but creativity is everywhere. How we engage in our relationship, kind of food we make, kind of home we keep, whatever. It is a creative space. It's not a mechanical process. Otherwise, we'd be all living on the moon. You come out like a machine and you operate and you go back, reverse in the machine and rest and recharge your batteries. And so human beings are at every level. So I think the minute we start putting walls around that, what is art or what is creativity, I think it just takes away the entire sense of what creativity is.
I've never heard anyone actually put it in that way, but I guess I do agree with you, because I've just never looked at it in that way.
Right.
Touching on what we were talking earlier about structure versus unstructured. If it's art, therefore there should not be. It sounds like there should not be a structure to it.
That's right, yeah. Because the whole DNA of art is, free-spirited, free thinking, free expression, all that stuff, right?
You've said I've heard you say on some of the podcasts that from your perspective, art also is there's a beauty, and it's also a reflection on, society, and it's kind of like, and you said it's one of those areas of expression that has no judgment. But from my perspective, just to play devil's advocate for a second, I believe art, but again, I'm not an artist, just from the outside world, I believe art is actually one of the most judgmental spaces. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So could you explain to me how you see it, and where's that disconnect maybe in the way I'm looking at it?
Right. So, it is judgmental, and it has to be judgmental, because you cannot build something which is otherwise, my practice, if I'm going to keep it within myself out of fear of being judged, then it's not really, you're not the messenger there. I see a disaster or event or whatever, good, bad, ugly, whatever, and I'm the messenger because I have the skill or the articulation, and I'm putting it out to the world. You may have one view, and the other person may have a million views on something. It's like best example I give you is like, we go to a restaurant, 5 of us, we have this great meal, and we love it, we just love it. And you may say, oh, I love that flavor, but reality is this, that if we had to really technically take from each of us what we really loved, it cannot match, because your taste is something which is very much you. I may say, oh, I love the saltiness in the fish, but it doesn't still complete it, So what I believe is that we do judge, we look at things, which brings me to that, how do we work with, what you touched upon earlier, art for art's sake, or art for beauty, or art for social change. These are issues. As an artist, you pick that and you maybe evolve into it. I used to be automobile photographer in my last life. It was such a different life I led in fashion and lifestyle and all that stuff. But then I was not really much into it after a point. It became very repeating, like a treadmill. But art, I also feel, is that, you can, of course, have many views, a lot of all kind of judgmental space and all that stuff. But it is finally, as an artist, it's your personal choice that what strikes you. So some people, it may strike that, I want to paint roses because I want to make people feel this beauty I want to share. And some artist thinks that, I want to reflect on what's happening in the wars across the world. So it's just really whatever hits you. Of course, today it's a difficult one because everybody is so much into package design. You don't even know where, and hypocrisy exists on every form. Every person is not that artists are living this great life that I'm untouched by this. Of course, the guy is looking at his ATM, looking at what kind of money is coming in there, right? So But yeah, we can talk more on the art space. I mean, have more thoughts, questions, whatever. I can keep talking on that.
No, so on the, I think the biggest takeaway for me is how you look at art. I think because I was trying to reflect on my perception of it in the sense that I know I apologize if I'm messing up the terms here, guys, but you know that art, as it's called contemporary art, where it's like maybe just like a pencil and like on the ground, and you're like, wow, yeah, that's art. I'm like, look, in my mind, like to me, this is where I struggle, because I'm like, I'm in two minds. To me, as Khalid, I'm like, I don't consider that art, but you might have a very compelling story that might make it. You could make it, in a quotation marks, artistic. But if I look at a painting, a design, like something visual, that's where I see, that's my metric of art. So those two worlds in my mind don't collide. But to use your definition, there's art, I can argue then, there's art in that story, there's art in this conversation, there's art, art is everywhere and can be anywhere, but I have a very specific view on it. So coming back for a second to creativity.
Right.
As we mentioned earlier, we're all born creatives, and then that gets killed through us through the traditional systems that we have in place. Right. And I was thinking, I'm like, why does that happen? I'm trying to understand why, and this is a big passion point I have. One of my, hopefully, one of the legacies I'd like to leave behind someday is I want to revolutionize the educational system, because the way I grew up and what I was taught in school and what real life taught me had nothing to do with each other whatsoever. Not in terms of passion, in terms of lessons, in terms of anything. So I really want to change that. How? That's we'll figure it out. Hopefully we have some time to do that.
Right.
But I think one of the, I was trying to play devil's advocate. I'm like, okay, why are we all put in this specific box and there's no ability for us to maneuver? And I think the challenge is, because you touched on it earlier, it's based on performance. Performance is very easy to read. Art and creativity is not. So it's like, then I'm like, okay, then how do I create an environment that, because there still has to be some assessment in some way, but art is subjective. Right. A grade is not. Yeah. So what's your take on that debate?
Right. So the example you gave, let's say there is a pencil and there's an apple and it's stuck in there, and you're like, abstract.
That's what it's called.
And you would say, or anybody would say that, hey, I could have done it. The easy answer is that, well, you should have, right? But But what I believe is, and it's not me believe, I mean, a lot of people believe in this, is that finally art is about connecting in your head. Some may connect to that, some may not connect to that, some may connect to a painting, for example. But the bottom line is that it is about reaction. It is about what you pointed out in the beginning, that judgmental space. Those are the things which is what makes human mind think differently. You wake up in the morning, even people who talk about that, you have issues in your head. You're not thinking, you're not able to think or something. You wake up in the morning, and if you're a right-hand person, you brush your teeth with your left. Mm-hmm. You are struggling with something. The problem is that, as they say, two things which are, as you get old and when you hit dementia, two things they always say, which, because mind is crazy, they still haven't figured out. It's a very deep science, which will take whatever time. But it's like driving, you never give up, because you'll always, it doesn't matter. Even if you're going to office on that straight line, you know it, because you have to negotiate traffic, rear view mirror, side view mirror indicating, and every day, every second will be different. Though the street is the same, the car is the same, your driving skills are the same. Or the other thing is crossword, where again you have, so what I'm saying is that art is something which will give you that space where you will struggle to trying to figure it out and not able to figure it out, that, hey, it's apple and pencil, what's the big deal about it? I like, those colors. But what it's doing, it's like a simplest example. What was that artist's name? I forget, that banana,
taped to the, yeah.
So what was it? there was so much of art about, it was not I could have, you could have stuck an apple there. Anybody could have done whatever. And I'm not even saying, oh, you should have done it then before him. I'm not even talking about that. But it got so much of reaction, of course, because we live in this whole digital space and, so much social media, all that other stuff. And then the guy who bought it, he ate it, and it's like, or some artist's work is being shredded and that became a piece of art. So it's the reaction, which is what it is. It's always reaction, because you can look at, you can go to the Vatican and look at these beautiful ceilings, and there is a reaction to that, oh my God, look at this, how they've done it. And you may look at a film done by some Palestinian filmmaker, and which is a totally different world. So it's also not about that as human beings, because we've all learned 2 + 2 is 4, that art also has to be the same kind of thing, that we have learned it that way. So our results and our impact and our, opinion, whatever, has to be the same, because it can't be. And that's the charm of it, I think,
Yeah, and I think I love the example you gave of that banana tape to thing, because even I'm not in that space, but even I saw that and I'm like, what the fuck, what's artistic about this? I don't get it.
Exactly.
But what I've understood from you, I guess, art is about connection and connection struggle and invoking an emotion in someone, either positively or negatively. Exactly. So that guy, although to me as Khalid, I wouldn't consider art, he invoked the emotion of like, fuck this, so like it did still spark that, right? Yeah. And you started, I know when you were 13 or 14, you got your first camera, right?
Right.
And you said, you touched on it a little bit earlier, that, with every failure makes you more of a risk taker, because you now have less to lose, right?
Right.
So, but what was it about that camera when you held it for the first time? Because I know you said the first couple of pictures were that you were shooting blanks and you had to send it to London to get things done, and they'd come back back blank and stuff. So what was it about? I don't know, because I feel from my perspective, listening to your story, that was the genesis of this.
Right.
That camera was the genesis of this journey.
Right. I think that was, and also those struggles and those disappointments. I would shoot something, give it to my dad midterm. He would ship it to Bombay or London. It was Kodachrome. And it would come back, as you said, blank, nothing there. And so you just faced it. That, man, you're no good at this. And you're creating your own whatever, that how do I get out of this stuff? So I wouldn't really say that, maybe, actually you're right, maybe the camera was something which came to rescue, because I had my own little sanity, oasis or whatever, spot basically, where I just loved doing it, though it took me quite some time to master or whatever, figure it out rather than master. I find also what I look at, it's again going into the art space, we can talk later about, but, a lot of people come to me and like, I want to be a photographer, I want to be a fashion designer, I want to be a chef or whatever. But man, there's no jobs there and there's no money in there and all that. And I'm like, how much do you love it? I love it. I'm like at it, I just love cooking and all that. So what I tell people is that, especially the times we live in, and it's going to get tougher, is that you pick up, and this is what I tell young people, that's your passion, that's your sanity spot, that is your oasis of, celebration, and it's a very personal space. Right?
Very true, yeah.
And so think of it this way. What you need is get yourself a day job. If you make a great success being a chef or a photographer, wonderful. But the chances are very tough. And it's not today, it's always been. It's very, very tough. Because today the pie is even bigger than what it was, 20, 30 years back. But there are many more people on that pie. So, but what I say is that you need to keep this sanity thing within yourself. You are working in an office, you hate your boss, you hate your job, it's giving you the money, so you're doing it. You come home, you may not be getting along with your partner. There are a lot of issues in life which you have to deal with, and they are not to your liking. But then you come back, and then there is something which is so personal. And nobody in the world is part of that. It's just you may share that meal with your partner, or you may take a picture of your kids because you like photography. But I'm not talking about that. Just the deeper connect you have with this is something which you need to protect. Don't get into trying to commercialize or make a living out of it, because most likely it won't work and you will hate it. So the only sanity spot you have, you strangle that too, So it's really important that keep that away from everything else. I mean, don't let you share it, but don't let that become your focus, that I'm going to make a career out of it. And that I always tell to young people when people come for, I love photography, I want to do this. And I'm like, yes, keep doing it. Get a day job so you don't get disappointed. And you'd be so upset with that you'll never want to look at that pan or that camera ever. And that's a really very, and creativity is a it's a blessing. It's something so precious given to you. And people who manage to make something out of it, they have stood their ground in their head more than anything else, because they've had every challenge, whether parents, checkmating because it's not a secure place to be, your partner or, your friends who are all moving to all the conventional jobs and making their money and all that. Are you prepared to take that? And we are only, we get influenced by the world. We get influenced by our families and friends and all that stuff. So how well you can hold yourself in there. And that's really hats off. In fact, especially in developing countries, in Africa or South Asia, when I meet young girls, who are in design school or in photography school, and my first thing is, basically hats off to you. You basically got out of something you decided. Parents know very well that if you want to be a secure grown-up girl, get a degree which will get you a job. But you're doing something, you fought everyone, and you're so brave. In a such a judgment, forget judgmental. They'll just roll all over you. That kind of thing. So I really find that keeping this whatever gift you have, you need to really keep it. It's your place when you are fed up with the world and you want to just drop dead. And imagine I go to the kitchen and I just make a meal. I mean, how beautiful! And you share it with people, So that's how I look at it.
No, it's very interesting how you describe it as a gift. It's not something I ever looked at it, in that way. And you talk about it very passionately, and like you said, it's that place of sanctuary. It's that place that fuels a part of you that the rest of the world cannot fuel, and that you love, and especially I think if it's a world that you're constantly see improvements of, it just motivates you to keep going and keep going. And the better you get, doesn't guarantee you get the chance that you want, but it will increase. It can increase those chances, and you can leverage that, right?
Yeah.
And so I know you've worked, across many communities, from the Assam's Thai Packet tribe.
Yes.
Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Right. To migrant workers in lots of different cities. And you've said, and we're kind of touching on what we were just talking about, what makes you an artist is that voice inside of your head. It's your interpretation of the world, and that a lot of that comes from the environment, right? So could you tell me, because it's a very, now that I have the context of how we've defined art, this question becomes a lot more difficult, but let's see how we go. Could you tell me then the first time you felt like an artist? I know it's based on what we just said, since art is like just it's a place that doesn't have, let's say, for the base of our conversation, if art has no definition,
right,
how do people then define themselves, as artists? Because the rest of the world will look at me, they'll be like, no, Khalid's definitely not an artist. But they'll look at you and be like, no, Samar is an artist. Do you get what I'm saying? Right. So there is some, I don't know if it's criteria or there is some metric that makes that distinction. So I don't know how it looks externally, but for you personally, when did you feel like, oh, now I would consider myself an artist?
Yeah. So I think I've never really labeled for within myself being an artist. I think for me, between being a risk taker or being a failure, trying to try different practices, those things really are the larger issue. And then, yeah, okay, you come across an artist because you practice that, So it's not really, it's not artist first, but it's the experience which you have within yourself, which you want to share or learn or expose or whatever. I think that's what really defines as a creative, as an artist, I would say. Which also brings me to, in terms of what really, what you just spoke about in terms of working with that Thai Buddhist tribe and all these various projects, different mediums and all that, brings me to the biggest gift you can have, which I really is boredom.
Boredom.
Yeah, if I can get bored, that means your mind is empty. You don't know what to do. And it's not about let's meditate and let's go to Vipassana and do all those other things. But boredom is such a precious gift, because when you're sitting with nothing, one cannot imagine. I mean, it's really taking yourself to another level of your mind. And I think for me, the practice has been full of boredom. So when I came here, I had this big bills to settle and all that, and I landed up in, I got introduced at Emaar offices. They were really tiny office at Trade Center at that time. And it came to that, they're going to be, Marina is built, but there are no buildings. They were just starting off. And because it was film days and all that, so they had sold a lot of properties overlooking the Gulf, but not on the other side. I think Montgomery was still being built or whatever, and there was nothing in that time. I'm talking 25 years back. And so we went on a helicopter and we shot these panoramic shots, and they make these brochures, which are all, large, very beautifully done. So I figured out that, okay, this is a great way to make money. And the excitement, because I used to work for a car studio in Boston earlier, so it was, you're in your 30, and you're just so excited about all this excitement, going on a chopper and shooting and all that stuff. Every kid likes that. I liked it too. Then came in this other process of, so I did a couple of that for a few years, and the boredom set in because it became mechanical. The money was great, all that stuff, and they'll be chasing you and all that stuff. So I did was, which I was actually already doing it before I came here. So this suitcase with about 50 cameras, and I would go in conflict areas and teach photography to kids. And so conflict of, so I spent many years in Afghanistan, where working with girl children, working with many organizations, including Afghan Red Crescent and all that, where we would work with young girls in a space of, it's non-judgmental, it's a safe space, safe environment, and it's storytelling, and they'd make pictures, and we go back to the community or in their school, and then you do a photography show there. And because photo was still not on your phone yet. Then I worked in East Africa. A lot of albino killings were happening there. It still happen. So worked with albino kids. Worked in Jordan with Palestinian camps where kids can go to school, or in India, Bangladesh, so many places, Sri Lanka and all that stuff. So it was at one level, it was also away from driving, some mega car and living in Marina, all that. It was a different side to which, because I was getting bored with that stuff out here. It was so predictable. It was so assembly line. It was so, treadmill. Everybody knew what to deliver. The team knew and all that. So that's how, one big project popped up was, by that time they had moved to Marina where Emaar offices were. And somebody said to me that, we're going to be building the world's tallest tower. There were no drawings, nothing. They were just talking about it, So I went to Dubai airport. I rented a chopper. And what is downtown used to be called Defense Roundabout that time. So we made like 2-3 rounds up there. And then I made these pictures, made these cut and paste boards out of it. And a presentation were put through and all that. And I went to the client, it took a while for them to buy into it. That was the best part about Emaar, was that they were such great listeners. It's some new idea. And it just changed, I mean, we hired more people, I had a business partner. So we created a much wider platform. But the boredom was there because now the money was sorted out every month. It was a big, huge 6-year contract, whatever. So all that was coming. And that's where a lot of these other art practices. So within Burj Khalifa, I started photographing the migrant workers, and there we had. Client is not interested. No client is interested. Their purpose is this, make it glossy and sell. That's what they are there for. So I started photographing because I was very interested in this whole identity and migration, and this whole conflict of, and it's not just in Middle East, it's everywhere. You see that how workers get marginalized anywhere in the world, developed country, underdeveloped, whatever. So that is how I started photographing the workers. It was about identity. It is about people coming from distant land. How you leave your cultures behind. You come into the space where it's work and sleep and eat, and that's how your cycle happens every day. So I started doing portraits. We recreated that experience. We actually every morning would go. We built a small studio there, and we had these blackboards with chalk there. And they would write their name on it, and we do a portrait of theirs with their name on it. It was also about repeating that most of people, I would say, majority, weren't really photographed before they got their first passport. So for that, they need a picture. A lot of them were not literate. They didn't know how to write, but they had to learn how to write their name. So we repeated that. We did a portrait, passport picture, and with that chalk, they would write in their own language. So we shot the whole. So there were, I think, about 3,500 men who built that tower. So I have 3,500 portraits. So we just did the entire thing as a complete, and with that, we traveled in lots of places, China, all kinds of places. So it would just come back to us that. Once you figure it out, what I said right in the beginning, that takes away the charm. It takes away the whole hunger and this whole self-discovery and the failures, all that stuff, because it's just up on the table. I can come here, when I used to shoot interiors, I shoot this. If you commission me for every month, once a month, I'll give you a new picture of the same room each month, because there's another way I'll do it. But that's it. You're just in that box, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
And listening to those stories and all the different places you've worked, and talking about, working on such a, massive project like the Burj Khalifa, but also your passion to bring the worker stories into it, and this concept of identity. I think that word is very important, because my perspective is, through the research I've done, and the work that you've been talking about, is I feel like your career, or the work, all the different projects and stuff you've been taking on, is for you to not define, but to get a deeper understanding of what Samar's true identity is. That's what it seems to be to me, in the sense, because especially in a lot of the humanitarian work that you do, and I know you do workshops as well all over the world. I feel those humanitarian work, I think, will reshape your identity in a way that no other form can. I feel like it just touches a different side of you. So I'm curious, what do you think about that? And is there a story from all these that really, really, really stands out?
Yeah, but I think right in the beginning what I said, and I've never really, I think subconsciously it has played. Now as I'm older, I can see it. I think that issue of being less in school days, for whatever reason, whether it's grades or whether it's your language skills or whether you look different or whether you weren't really the athlete, weren't popular with the girls and all that stuff, which typical teenager has to deal with. I think all those things have helped. And so I give you another dimension to it, is that that failure part is that if I don't get that, I've worked so hard to put that exhibition, it doesn't work out. There's a client, I pitched so much, I put so much effort, time, created all these images, and it didn't work out. Or somebody is messing with you, be it personal or professional or whatever, whether it's coming with money or whatever. I think you are so good at walking away from it, because what you've seen the bottom, it can't be worse than grade 7 for me. So as a metaphor, I think, and then you can apply that, subconsciously apply that, So I think many times I manage to, and maybe it's also, I mean, I really haven't thought of it since we're talking about it, but maybe it is also to do with that this fear of permanence is also a very difficult place for me to live with. And I'm not talking because we live in a global world and because I've traveled or lived in many places and all that stuff. But bottom line is that how many lives can you have in one life, And not that I wear that T-shirt and run around, but I think that really helps me in terms of that change. And that change has been horrible also at times. I've fallen very badly. I have bankrupted very badly. Emotionally, I have been thrashed out. All that stuff has happened. But, when you hit that bottom, you're only going to come up, right? You're not going to go any further. And then when you come out and then you go on and you do this great and then you try something new and again you like, okay, let me go and try to be, a teacher. I run this Red Balloon which you talk about. I'm not a parent. I work with young kids, young people. I'm not a development sector guy. I'm not educated for that. I'm not coming from any of that stuff. But the amazing learning one has in there, which is like, how many learnings can we get in a lifetime? I mean, and solid stuff I'm talking about. And that has really, it's like a sponge, I think, also because we all try to, and I'm not saying that I'm great success in that, but the idea of observing and absorbing, listening and taking it in and being a sponge or whatever, I think if you can have that ability in you, it can do wonders. Forget the world, it does wonders to yourself, It can really help you in terms of your own personal growth, but more than the growth itself, it's just another life and one more life. And I'm just so, I think if the biggest takeaway for me whenever I would think about is that I think I would love to have many more lives. It's like so many different things. Yeah. And you look back, I'm sitting in my late 50s, I would look at it and I would say that, you are a kid, 20, things you don't know. I'm not 100 or I'm not 90 or whatever. But I also look at it this way that these last 35 years of my working career and those 10 years of growing and failures and all that, so you put all that together of last 50 years, let's say, I would say that I have been so fortunate to see so many things. So many experiences, Of course, we all have experiences as we get older, no doubt about it. But making something out of it, something you're passionate about it. It's not, you can, whether it's your practice, whether it's people, whether it's relationship, whether it's, places you have lived, concepts you have developed, all that stuff. Man, it's like... it's never enough, but it's good.
I love the way you described it as the fear of permanence. You know what I'm saying? I think that should be the title of whatever next book you write. And what I love about your story and the way you described it is how many different lives can I live in this one? Even off camera, as we were talking earlier, 10 years ago, Khaled, I sold all my stuff and I don't have like a apartment like anywhere in the world. And I'm moving around the world. And I was like, what? Like, how do you do that? Right. And that's just a testament to what you were just talking about. And like you said, I think because you've been all over the world and worked in it's not about just working in different places. You've done different types of work in all these places. So the learning from all that is priceless, not only in what value you can then deliver to people, but it really does shape your character and your identity, as a person. So some of the projects I know you worked on are, for example, the Bhopal disaster, Bhopal, a silent picture. And when I was listening to you talk about it, how you got a 40-foot container and there was temperature-controlled rooms and the names and that. And then there was another one that you worked on with the outpost at the Venice Biennale, and you transformed the miners' containers into homes and stuff. So what has this, I guess, worldly journey you've been on, and worldly journey also through arts that you've been on, when you look at art and you bring the cultural aspect into it, and you've done stuff across in so many different places which have all completely different cultures, what has that experience been like? What have you learned about art across different cultures?
Yeah, so I think, again, it goes back to what your approach is towards. And it's never about that, okay, there is a hotspot, let me go there and let me develop something. It's never about that. These things evolve. A lot of these projects run parallel. So let's say I give you a good example of, I love the idea of going to new places. We all do. And I found out that there was a World War II road which was built during the war, obviously, by an American journal called Stilwell, which was from northeast part of India into upper Burma and into southwest China. And, Japanese were all over the place, including the Indian side of it. And because that was British Raj, and, another conflict space. What I wanted to do was to rediscover that road. So I had a partner. We decided to come through that. We drove from Kunming. There was no roads when you came to Burma. Sanctions fully on. It was disaster. There was Kachin state insurgency. So much army. You get stopped. You get sent back. All that drama happened. But anyway, I managed to make that attempt. Came this side, and I met these guys at the border on the Indian side. And nobody comes through that forest. I mean, these are thick forests. And there were a lot of things which happened within that, so I spent a lot of time in there. Basically, the guy took me to the commanding officer or whatever. And they found out that I'm an Indian guy. And, so we were on this. And he thought that I was some NGO guy. So he took me to some community. And that's where this funning thing started. So that's the name of a village. They're Buddhist. They're from Burma originally. There are about 1,500 of them left. This village was about 200 of them. And I spent, I would say, next dozen years with them, in and out. And I didn't come from any of those expertise, but we basically set up ecotourism project, owned and operated by the tribe. I got through education, about 7 odd kids, put them through school, a couple of them went to college. I also worked on helped put some money together for building a monastery, which was there half built, so that added income to the village. A couple of other programs I tried, forestry and all that, but it's such high rainfall area, so that thing just blew away. That I was speaking at a TEDx talk in Vienna, which was on artist role in sustainability and capacity building. And there was some connection with some people in the audience who connected with the community and revived textile, because each home has a loom. And then, of course, I built a studio and we started photographing. We did the entire thing. And then our first show opened in the village at 6 a.m. because before they all go to their farmland, So that was my first exhibition with them. There was large format, black and white, big portrait, 6 feet tall. We did the show, in Delhi, we went to Washington, we went to a bunch of places. We created the entire experience. I was trying to bring that experience to the audience. So as you walk through the show, it was pitch dark. The work which I keep talking about is that my work is really focused on conflict issues. So conflict is not this conventional war zone, but how this model of urbanization and consumption culture, as it arrives into global South, how people get marginalized, their way of life, corporate responsibility, environmental issues. I mean, there's so many things. So Bhopal was one about that, a corporate responsibility. This was about a community which is sitting next to coal mines. And India is not like China, where you just move 1 million people because you want to build a stadium. So that struggle was there. So I was trying to work, and whatever understanding or whatever travels I've had, typically you would never find in mining communities is never locals. It's always migrant workers who come there. So that was another conflict about, and it's a very complex place, But the show which we did, we recreated an experience of a mine. It was just this pitch dark, massive gallery, and it wasn't like everybody hanging around with their champagne and chatting and looking at. They were just portraits. just 12 of them in total darkness, and we allowed only certain number of people to go in. They would go with a helmet, with a little helmet light, which the miners use. And you go in there and you just identify your own portraits, in this darkness. So you come out and the conversations happen outside. You may talk about this old lady or whatever it is. And then also I hate the idea of making anything, this exotica kind of stuff. So there was a television screen where there was a documentary of what the community looked like. Because there was electricity in that place, so we had recorded sounds of the village, at nighttime, crickets and all that. So you hear that subtly in the. So even when we launched it, I got 2 people from the community. They made these out of these recipes of their traditional eating, which was the snacks, starters for everybody too. So you try to connect your audience at as many levels as you can. Of course, you're so bombarded with this stupid screen we watch all the time. Here the attempt was really to take people into it. So what it feels like. So sorry, I've gone in all kind of directions. But you were talking about art practice, and you were talking about
across different cultures.
Yeah. Something which also you learn is the big takeaway is that 2 things you really get to know. As you travel, as you go yourself into new places, new whatever, which will always work is your skill of tolerance, so whatever they are. And the other thing is the adaptability. Because if you can master these 2 things, you can be in the middle of nowhere. Forget creature comfort. I'm just saying that you will never feel, it'll never be a difficult situation. Because these are 2 really critical things, what kind of tolerance you can have, and how it adapt to any situation, even bad food, because you're like, man, at least I'm eating.
Do you think you would have been, because I know you've done work all over the world, and you mentioned so many of those projects there, do you think you would have been able to deliver on those projects the way you had if you didn't have such a diverse upbringing living across those 14 countries when you were younger? Because I think that set the stage for you to develop such, I'd say, higher levels of tolerance and adaptability.
Right, yeah. I think, a couple of factors. The biggest factor I really believe is that if you can, as an artist, you have a tent. So you have a tent of a painter. And I'm a painter, and I'm like the rock star, or trying to be a rock star in that tent, that tent is all my audience and my buyers and, gallerists and curators and all that. Or it can be a tent of publishers. I go to Frankfurt Book Fair, I've done so many books, we do many of those. Or I can be a filmmaker that I go to, film festivals. And the thing is that we sign up for that tent. And we don't want to get out of that tent, because who wants to risk? You come out and there might be a snowstorm, there are no tents around, and you're not going to be let in because you've gone for so many years, and they're going to look at you and say, hey man, you don't belong here, not say, but you won't fit in back in there. So that fear is always a big problem with creative people, I think, because that's where their left brain kicks in, because you are not a risk taker. You think that I'm a risk taker, but actually most are not. You're just trying to, and there's nothing wrong with it, because you gotta pay your bills and live your life and all that stuff. So I think for me, it was about always getting out of that tent. So it's like,
that's a good metaphor.
Yeah. So I would come back from, let's say, doing a shoot in Namibia. I used to do shooting for some car company there out of South Africa, and or any time. It's traveled so much, and I used to live in Marina, or I used to live in Green Community. I'll be on that Sheikh Zayed Road going, towards from the airport at some 2 in the morning or whatever. And I'm looking on the other side, cars are zipping. Now, typically you think about, I'm going to be home, hot shower, that coffee shop, going to call up my pals, this is the dinner we're going to go, oh man, those parties and whatever, so many things wherever you live. My big thing was always about, I'm looking at the other side of the road and I'm saying, man, that's where I gotta be, heading to the airport again. And that's it's a terrible thing, because if I say this with friends and all, it's okay. In a relationship, it's like, man, you just want to leave. You don't want to commit. You don't want to be with anyone. That's the slap you get, But, I think relationships also become of course, everybody's a control freak. We may say whatever, but I think it's also to do with what kind of understanding you have about a person. And I think the trouble starts when you start to change that person's DNA.
When you try, when you try to, for sure.
Nobody escaped that. We suffer at some other level, yeah.
I love the analogy you gave of, the tent, and, you worked so hard to get into that tent, and this is the tent you always wanted to be a part of, and now you're really scared to leave. And that is a metaphor to anything, in life. I had a guest on the show recently, and we were talking about clarity and how do you find it and stuff. And he said, Khalid, where uncertainty exists, clarity cannot. You need to be certain and stuff. And that kind of touches on what you were talking about in that example. Now, I know you mentioned that you had many failures. You mentioned you also had many, many successes. My question to you, because again, I'm going back to where we started the conversation. Right. If art is subjective and art is my Khalid's or Samar's interpretation of that, if I'm going through that context, then I have never, in quotations, failed as an artist. But the more interesting question for me is, how do you measure the success of a project or something you've worked on? You know what I'm saying? Because I'm sure always when you reflect, you'll be like, you come up with new ideas, you learn more, you could have done that thing differently, maybe put the light, there's always something to improve. But how do you personally measure, I guess, the success of what you do?
Yeah, so I think different measurements people have. Measurements of, you measure it with impact, which is very difficult to
measure in itself.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have a meter for that. But if you are showing in a gallery and X amount of work is sold, then you say that that's a success, right? I'm not talking just about because you make lots of money out of it. So that's another way of looking at it. I think, I've never had this question before, but the measuring of success is, how would I look at it? I mean, success would be figuring it out for yourself, that I went to that community. I'm not a tour operator or an architect to work with them to do a traditional bamboo architecture. I go to some project, or I'm not an educationist that I got these kids through. And it's not writing about checks. That's the easy part of it in life. Our forestry program, I don't come from environmentally. I think the biggest success for oneself is that you figure these things out, So it is not the final output. I had a show and so many people came and people bought prints and all that stuff. I've never sold that show ever to anyone because I've always kept it that, it's my own sanity spot, and I haven't done it for any commercial reasons. And I've been very blessed that I had projects like Burj Khalifa and all that, which actually was funding all this stuff. So I think when you ask me about the success, I would say that how many things which you had no clue about and you figured it out. And I think that is really, and it's a very personal thing.
Yeah, that's one. Of course.
Because it's, Bhopal is a very good example. I went for BBC about 20 years back on a shoot when it was 20 years of Bhopal, of that Union Carbide disaster, world's biggest disaster, where that plant blew up and killed thousands of people. I went in there into the plant. I did some pictures. There was some story for BBC which was done, but I made some photographs, and then you have the interest. So I went to the railway station. I met people there, and there were some guys who were saying that it happened 20 years back. So many people died. These trains were coming in. There were people who were dead on the trains and all that, and it just started. I think it's also to do with, I always say is that, you work in the space. I'm your 200th guest, right? You have worked on so many professions, so many people, you have so many antennas. You're genuinely interested. When you're a musician, you have certain questions. Somebody who's a technocrat, you have a different kind of question. So the idea is that how many antennas you keep activated. And that's really the most amazing thing, because what it does is that then you're always interested in it. It's your personal growth. It's nothing you do you're not going to stand somewhere and say, hey, I've spoken to a musician, a rock star, and a photographer, and a philosopher. Nothing you do. It's your own thing. So going into that Bhopal thing was, I'm giving you a process of it. I went back, a couple of years later and got more into research, found out what it was. So I said, why not let's create an experience. And I'm not a disaster pornography guy. I want people to look at it, read it, whatever they want to. They may get bored that, hey, what's this banana trip? Anybody could have done it. Why isn't it a painting of roses? Whatever. So we got this container, 40-foot container. And as you said, we brought the temperature to single degree. We brought mannequins with all shapes and sizes, stretched 40-foot long black fabric, put hundreds and hundreds of names on that. On the other side, we put these large 3D backlit images of the plant. So it's like a train journey, you're looking out, and it's called Bhopal, a silent picture. And then it was like, I traveled around in India and all that stuff. And Dow Chemical, which owns Union Carbide, they were the sponsors for London Olympics. And he said, man, let's take it to the Olympics unofficially, obviously. So we took it with Amnesty International, put it outside the Olympics and showed it in the east part of the city. It's not that I'm against Olympics or whatever, the spirit of sportsmanship, but it is about, as human beings, come and see what else exists, It's not this, and we live in, unfortunately, the times where it is so much about packaging and so much about headline management. But, reality, that shit is there. You can't avoid it. And you just pretend,
Touching on what you talked about there, I love the analogy you said about when you were talking about like my podcast, different antennas. I never looked at it through that. Like, I know that's what I'm doing, but I never had the a metaphor to explain it. But that is the whole reason why I do what I do, because I just love to speak to people and learn. I've already learned like 10 million things, in our conversation so far. It's very interesting to me how you measure success in the sense of how it's not how did that picture look when it came out, but how many different frames, brushes, techniques, people had to, like, how the complexity of the process that makes that outcome is how you have judged that success, which I think is very interesting and very counterintuitive to how we typically judge success, because our success, usually we only think about, did we deliver, did we not? Again, coming back to what we talked earlier, performance, win, loss, and unfortunately, I don't see the world changing on that front, to be very honest. I would love it. It would be great for it too, because I think it would open a lot more interesting areas that people aren't, I think it would encourage a lot more people to explore this right brain, part of them and their creativity and so on. You said in one of your TED Talks that you talk about listening to the wisdom of elders. Right. So I'd love to hear from you. Is there someone or either it's a philosophy, advice, whether you read about it or whether, was someone that was actively you met or part of your life that you really took to heart and just changed your perspective?
Right. So, I think we get very much into, when we are on a stage, that, this was my mentor, this I got impacted, whatever. I think they play subconsciously in your head. I worked with, let's say, with His Holiness, with the Dalai Lama. I met him first time. I was doing a picture of his for a magazine, and we had 15 minutes, and then, suddenly, and he was going to go for a walk. And we were at his home up in the mountains in India, and near Dharamshala, and we were waiting for the rains to stop. There was this pouring, and it stopped, and he said, "You want to come for a walk with me?" And I said, "Of course." And I walked with him for 45 minutes, and we were just chatting, and he gave me all the time in the world, which was really amazing. Then I bumped into him. So that time he told me that you make pictures, you do photography, what kind? And, I was a kid. I was in my 20s that time. And, what's the purpose of this? And is it something much bigger? I couldn't really digest all that. I was just so much like, man, he's here with me. I just want to hear whatever he says. Yeah. And years later, I bumped into him a couple of times. I met him at the elevator in some institution. I was stepping out. He was coming in. And then he called me to his room. And he gave me this beautiful whatever, So... And we chatted, and he again asked me and then something, and then I was leaving and I was walking, and already this was 20 years later, and I was thinking about that. Did he play any part that I do what I do? But I think at some level, these things always come and settle in your head. I was, once in a place called Lucknow, which is in north part of India, and there was this magazine. I was doing this big, massive shoot for them. It was hot and humid, and month of June, monsoons kicking in, and all that stuff. I saw this beautiful home, old house, really old house. So I did a picture, and I wanted, some detail, and also asked for permission and all that stuff. Knocked on the door. This guy came outside, and he said it was a big mansion, and said to me, yes. I said, I need to get who owns this, which year it was built, and all that stuff. It was a beautiful piece of building. And so he said, oh, come with me. So he went in and then came by. He said, come, owner, you're going to meet the owner. So he took me inside, and in this pitch darkness, and the good thing was there was air conditioning on, and those old ACs, which were window ACs. So there was a little light running there. And he made me sit down, and he decided to leave. So I grabbed him. I said, where are you going? Well, I have no idea. I mean, imagine taking somebody in the dark room for the first time in your life, And I was very scared of somebody might rob my camera because I'd lost a bag in Paris earlier. Yes, I was like, this should not happen. So he said, no, don't worry about it. Just sit, wait, he'll talk to you, And I'm sitting there, and then, this guy somebody talks to me about, who are you, elderly man? What's your name, where you come? So it was hardly a couple of minutes. And then this man appeared and touched me. I walked with him. I did some more pictures. And then I said, this was really amazing. Thank you so much. I got all the names and all that stuff. And I said, this is so unbelievable. How come I was in that? So he said, the person who owns this place, he's blind, And now that may be not my lifelong lesson, but at some subconscious level, it has always played that what does it take to feel less? What does it take to be that I'm not a white guy in a white community, or I'm not a privileged guy, in an Indian society or whatever. I'm privileged anyway. I think I'm one of those, it's an amazing blessing, gift, whatever you want to call, because, but what I felt about it is that how do you deal with your own, your darkness or your lessness or whatever you want to call it, right? And which brings me to that Ageless Mind and Spirit project. I was in my 20s, and India was still under socialism. Economy was opening up and all that stuff. And I started working photograph all on film, lights, all that. It was big, huge. But I was doing advertising, so I made enough money on that. And I photographed 400 people over 8 years. And it was all about disappearing cultures, communities, practices, how nuclear families, migration, things were changing and all that. Something which people have seen in Western society. But traditional societies in Asia and Africa is still there, now it's rapidly changing, of course. So the idea was to document that. And there were unbelievable people I met, millions of stories of obviously, meeting all these guys, which brings me to this, the other side to it is that this privilege thing, which I have unfortunately, I'm very judgmental about it, is that privilege is an accident. You're born in privilege. It's an accident. I'm born this. I didn't make a choice. I could have been the driver. I could have been some, in a war-torn area trying to save my skin. It can be any of that. But I'm born here. Now, what do you do with your privilege is what it is. Do I suffer from entitlement? Or do I say that, okay, I already have such a upstart or whatever up there. What can I, and it's, again, I keep saying, it is not about just because you have the money and you can every month donate to some school. You do it, great, that's really brilliant. But what kind of time you give, what kind of headspace you do, what kind of amplification you do about issues you genuinely feel about. And you don't need to be an artist, there are conversations, there's social media, there's so much. But what we get into is this whole entitlement space where it's like, this is my birthright, and that I have a very big problem, which I shouldn't be because everybody's got their own life to lead. But I just find that difficult,
Listening to when you said about that experience with the Dalai Lama, and then when you took that shot in that house, and it was blind. The two things, and I love what you said, that it's not like you when you reflect back, you're like, oh, it was that moment, whatever. But for example, what I took away when the Dalai Lama, for example, was asking you like, oh, so you take pictures, whatever, like, what's this for? He's not saying anything, but he's saying everything at the same time. You know, it's that seed that gets planted. You like, and then down the line, you're like, oh, this is what you build what it was for. You know,
right.
what the end project is. And same with the other one, when you know walking to the house and he's blind and like all the lights are off. What I took from me is what I took from that story. I'm like, you know, we're also very quick to judge and assume sometimes. You know, and then once you have that context, like even when you told me the story and you're like, he's blind, I'm like, oh, it's a completely new story now. And then on the last thing you said about the privilege and entitlement, you know, entitlement was something I definitely had when, you know, not too long ago, maybe like when I was 27, I definitely growing up here had that, you know, I call it Dubai kid syndrome, and then left and lived in Amsterdam for a couple of years, and life quickly slapped that out of me, thank God. I'm very humble and grateful that happened. But what I really took from you is not just that, is because all the stuff you've done is great, but it's all been for a bigger purpose and to make an impact and show a different side to the world that we don't really traditionally see, think about, you know, are aware of. And I wanted to round off our conversation today, Samar, with just two more questions. These are questions I ask all my guests. So looking back, this might be, I'm very curious to see where your answer to this would be. Looking back, either personally or professionally, when I ask you the question, what are you most proud of for yourself? What would you say?
Gosh, proud of... I mean, forget about all this communities and what you did and all that stuff. I think... I don't know, I've never really heard that question, so... I've never been asked that, but I think proud is to... Actually, I have a fear, which is not able to change, you know, because it's so easy to fall in that space, which is your comfort level. It's not necessarily about great money or great name or practice or whatever, but if you're not able to change, I think that is really the end of... So forget about many lives in one life. You know, it blocks you. So I think for me, if it's really about the question you had, then that's the answer. That, you know, able to take that risk, able to do all that, and at the same time, if I didn't, I would be, you know, and I had, because I've been in this thing for so long, I had plenty of opportunities, a lot of stuff where everything could work out, whether, married to a person who had so much wealth, and, you know, she was like, you do whatever you want to do with this, you know, whatever projects, whatever you want to do. But I think lack of hunger kills all your innovation, as you know. It kills your ideas. And struggles are so important, because when you're struggling, then you're so focused on your work. When you're not struggling, then I don't even know what you'll be thinking, man. It's like, and how many bars and coffees and holidays and Parises of the world will you do? You know, it's, I mean, it's okay if that's your choice, but personally not, you know.
Okay, so it's interesting that what you're most proud of is living a life in spite of that fear, because that's clearly the life that you've had, you know, right. Because you've been changing and still are been changing for years and years and decades and stuff. Right. And what I also appreciate is that it wasn't that obviously the community and all the stuff, the amazing work that you've done is very important, but that's not where you drive your pride from. It was a very personal thing, right, and the communities are the result of that. Right. Of that mission, that hunger, that continuously wanting to improve and change and add new antennas, to use your right. Analogy. And for my last question, Samar, because I know you're also we work as a mentor as well, you know, for young people and so on. What is the message you'd like everyone to take home with them today?
Oh, well, I think like we spoke earlier, that if you have that space of privilege, how do you extend yourself I'm not talking less fortunate and less whatever. It can be within your family. It can be within your friends. It's within about giving time, listening, whatever it may be. Because it's a very human thing. Empathy is a very human thing. You can't learn it in a textbook. It's not in school they teach you. Art does help. At least that's how I do with my Bread Balloon project, with working with young people. So I think, that's extending yourself with your time. Not always, resources. Time is the biggest resource you can actually give. Which also brings me to something else where, typically people would ask that, you do all this art, and does this really impact people? Because you don't have a measuring meter. It's not a great show I'm doing in a gallery, and 80% of work is sold, and you're like, this was great success. I'm working in areas where what I've worked with those Afghan girls over so many years. What impact does it have? I don't have any measuring device. I don't have any data. I don't even know where they are. So many people, and then so many different fronts. What I believe is that art is really, or any creative practice, is something which is your own answer for yourself. Because if that is fulfilling, then the impact and even the sales or whatever, those are all so not even secondary. They are so far. That's a different space. Does it impact you that you see something and you say that, this wall is great, but I think it needs to have this piece of art or this kind of color, because I feel that so connected to it. And I think that is really where your answers lie. Mm-hmm. They don't lie in the approvals and the stamps and the money and the fame and all that. That's a very different world altogether. And I think true artists are about that. Are they able to answer themselves? Are they honest to themselves? And there are, we all start with that honesty, but because of the so-called market-driven life we have, you start kidding yourself, and you start blocking yourself, and it's unfortunately a human problem. With it doesn't matter. It's not about art. It can be anything. How much are we honest to ourselves? Are we having conversation with ourselves and saying that, hey, listen, let's stop pretending. This is not what I am. But I'm not a shrink, so I don't know.
I think, first of all, I love that message of if you are in a privileged position, use it to be of service in whatever way, shape, form that might be. And it's not about changing the world, just changing, one person's life. That's, even that's enough, honestly. Which is kind of, my whole motivation of why I started the show was to have these conversations. I listened to podcasts once upon a time, and they changed my life. So I wanted to give back, and hopefully with my conversations with people, I'll be able to, do the same. And just like you said, there's no measure there. There's just,
Yeah, it may just trigger something.
You know what I'm saying? But on the impact thing, what I've learned recently is that I've started to shift my lens to, I relate it, to like my podcast, for example. I'm like, to shift from external focus to being more internal focused, in the sense of, yes, the views and all that, and all that is great, but why you're doing this, and the conversations you're having, and you're making an impact for yourself, which will help you make a bigger impact in the lives of your work, your colleagues, your friends, your family, everyone else around you. So it's shifting from, external to internal has been a big changing point for me, even quite recently as well. Right. And Samar, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today. This has been a long time in the making. I'm so happy we finally got a chance to sit down. You've really given me a lot to think about, and a whole new perspective on art. No one I've spoken to so far has talked about it in the way you have, and from that perspective. And it's something brand new to me. And excellent. I hope this will give me a deeper appreciation for that world that I've been very critical and hesitant of, in the past. And start to see maybe the arts in more art in people and everything around us. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again for your time. Thank you for waiting for so long.
Of course.
But no, I really appreciate it. I think it's sometimes it's good to be asked, and you also start thinking that, okay, man, because, we don't articulate ourselves, right? We live in this so-called shiny world.
And if people want to reach out to you, connect with you, check out your work, what's the best place for us to get in touch?
I guess we all are, victims of social media. So, Insta
we are.
Insta is there. A lot of stuff floats around in other places. But, it's... and if anybody wants to get involved in Dubai I'm not talking about getting legacy book projects out from me, but in terms of Red Balloon, people want to work with communities here, with young people. So we have the tools, and they can help in terms of people giving the expertise. What I said about Red Balloon, we basically work with visual arts and performance arts. It's a leadership program, it's a mentorship program, and young people come with their issues, and we bring in, whether it's a filmmaker or a puppeteer or a poet or a podcaster, whatever, they're all kinds of people. And they take those tools and then they put their narrative in there. And then they go so the leadership part is that they go back to their community and they amplify it there. So you own that space, you champion that issue. So your advocacy works better because you are from the same income group, privileged, underprivileged, marginalized, whatever it is, So I always keep pitching that whenever anybody wants to give time. And there are short programs, 1 week, spend a couple of hours with the kids,
Cool. I'll make sure to add all of those in the show notes. Samar, thank you so much, man.
Excellent.
This has been an absolute pleasure. Guys, for everyone listening, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Please make sure to like, follow, share, and subscribe to the podcast. I hope it helps. Pod on all channels. And as always, guys, hope it helps. Peace.
Thank you. Thanks for that, man.
Awesome job, man.
Excellent. Oh, that was cool. Yeah.
And that's another episode in the bag, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, podcasting is like this massive jigsaw puzzle, and my job is to help you find that missing piece. So if you're someone who's looking to launch your own podcast or take their podcast to the next level, you can book a call today and let's get started. TikTok.